everyone, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. My name is Christine and I like to read dark and disturbing things. Today we're going to be talking about my February reading wrap up. So let's just hop into it. If you're new here, hi, hello, my name is Christine and I like to break up my reading wrap-ups. I usually do like a mid-month and then I do an end of the month just so I'm not talking about 9 million books all at the same time because I can't remember them all and that's a lot of talking. So this will be what I read in the second half of February. I will put a link down below for what I read in the first half. But altogether, my stats are that I read a total of 11 books. I DNF'd one book. 6 of the books I read I owned prior to the start of this year because I am trying to get through what's on my shelves. 2 of the books I read were NetGalley arcs, so thank you to NetGalley for those. And I've been trying to get my NetGalley score up there. So I went at the beginning of the month from 34% to 37%. What did I start at the beginning of the year? I started at 33%. So I'm up 4%. I've read 3 arcs this year. I think that's a pretty good start. Let's start with our DNF, shall we? Another thing I've been trying to do is DNF a book if I'm just not feeling it. And I DNF'd Thorn by, I'm going to say this wrong, Intisar Kanani. This is a Goose Girl retelling. I've had this book on my shelf for a few years now. It's beautiful edition. Going through puberty. It's a beautiful edition here, and I was really excited to read this for Kat from Kat's Novel Adventure, her folklore and fairy tale or Folklore February readathon that she does every February. So I tried to get some like retelling, some fairy tales, some folklores in here, and this one just didn't work out for me. I did read the original Goose Girl story, which is pretty simple story from what I can tell. It's a story about a young girl who is being set up by her family to marry a prince, and on her way to go to the prince's village or kingdom or whatever it's called, one of her companions ends up trading places with her and passes herself off as this person. And so our main character becomes, you know, just a girl working on a farm called the Goose Girl because she's taking care of all the geese in the goose house. So this story starts off very much like that, and nothing is subtle. It's just, there's no nuance. Pretty much this girl has the reason I DNF'd it is this girl has 0 personality. So Alira is our main character, and she has like a really shitty home life. Her brother is abusive to her, both verbally and physically. Her mom is very mentally and verbally abusive to her and pretty much tells her how much she dislikes her all the time. I think her father has passed away. So her life at home kind of sucks, and she's not really given a choice. Her only value within this home is that she is going to be married off to this prince. She's never met him. She doesn't necessarily want to marry him, but you know, her home life kind of stinks. So she's like, what do I got to lose? Her only personality trait is that she's not an asshole. She's like the only like non-jerk in her whole house. Everybody else is just awful, and it's just overwhelmingly so. Like nothing is subtle, and it's just kind of like eye-rolly the whole time. And everywhere she goes, people seem to like her. And I don't get it because yeah, she's okay. She doesn't she's not a total jerk like everyone in her family, but she's just boring. And she has a talking horse named Falada. That's the horse is the most interesting part of the story. Anyway, I was so bored. It was super predictable. I got to, I think 52 or 42% maybe, somewhere around there. I was about halfway, and I just had to tap out because I didn't care. I didn't care about this character at all. Her not being awful was not enough of a personality for me. So I quit that one. The next one I read was a book that's been on my shelf a little bit, and it's called Annibot by Sierra Greer. Well, it looks like this one came out in March of 2024 because I got it as a book of the month pick. This one was interesting to me because this is a story about a sex robot that becomes autodidactic and is able to start to think for herself and make decisions for herself, I guess. So our main character is Annie. We are in her head, and she started off as what is called a cuddle bunny robot, which is basically a sex robot for her owner, Doug. And they were together for a few years, and he decided that he was going to change her programming from being just a cuddle bunny to being kind of like this newer form of robot where they let her start to have her own personality and make decisions for herself. So it was a decision that the owner made to kind of make her more lifelike, because he really actually wants her to be like a real girlfriend for him and not just a sex thing. So when we meet her, she's already been this way for a while now, and you know, she still cooks all his meals. She still does everything that she does is to please her owner slash boyfriend, from what she wears to what she cooks. And she tries to be as human as possible. Like, she can even eat food in small bits and then have to purge it later, because he doesn't want anyone to know that he's with this robot. Obviously, he wants people to think that she is real. So, I mean, what could possibly go wrong when you let someone that you own allow to make decisions for themselves and think and speak for themselves? Well, that's what we find out in this book. I was interested in this the whole time. This book will make you very angry at times, and then it does there is a character arc for both Annie and Doug, and you start to feel a little bit like maybe you were too hard on him at first. Yeah, this book's gonna piss you off, but it was still a very interesting ride, and I had a good time with it. I felt like the ending didn't quite land, though. For me, I thought it more kind of just petered out at the end, as opposed to making a huge point at the end of the book where I could feel good walking away from this situation. I mean, it allows you to see what it's like to be in a bad relationship, in a manipulative relationship. You see that even though Doug pretty much made Annie to his specifications, everything about her is manufactured by him, and he still isn't happy and can still find things wrong with her. It just kind of shows, I mean, I'm going to say as a female, because I'm a female, but as a female, just how you can never be perfect enough. It's not enough to fix somebody that is broken inside. And a lot of times we internalize that and think that there's something wrong that we did, but this definitely showcases that it's not you, it's him. So I can see in that way why this would piss a lot of people off, and it's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. It's supposed to make you upset. And I think if the end had enough of a payoff, that I would have been happy about it. But as it kind of came out, I don't know if I want to say, I think I'd give it like a 3.5 star, but I would round it down to 3 for Goodreads, because I really needed a stronger ending for this one. But it was definitely interesting, and I wasn't bored. The next book I read is one that I've been working on since sometime in January, and that is because it's a nonfiction book and it's a chunker. So this is Kate Moore's The Woman They Could Not Silence. This is a book about a woman named Elizabeth Packard who was involuntarily forced into a mental institution by her husband. And it wasn't because she had seen a doctor and was told that this was what she needed to do. It was because he did not like that she could speak and think for herself and had her own thoughts that didn't align with his, pretty much. Talk about another book that's going to piss you off is this one. I never read nonfiction. I picked this book up a few years ago on a whim because I saw the title and I saw it sound really interesting. There were a lot of tabs there, especially at the beginning, because there's so many things that happened that I just could not believe. For reference, this book takes place in 1860, a time when if you were a married woman, you did not own anything. You didn't own any money. You didn't own any property. Doesn't matter if you came into your marriage with those things, they now belong to your husband. So for reference, she was married to this man for many years. I don't wonder if it says. She has 6 kids with this man. So she has been married for a while. She's got 6 kids that she takes care of by herself. She takes care of her home, and her husband's job is some kind of priest or minister, some kind of religious position. I'm sorry, I'm not religious. So some sort of pastor or priest or something. And he was very happy with her. All her work, she works very hard to keep the house clean, to make all the meals, to take care of the kids, to sew all the clothes, to do all the things, right? He also liked that she ran some Bible study groups for the church until she starts having thoughts of her own and thoughts about theology on her own, and where we're kind of entering this age where women are starting to try to gain some independence, not where she lives, but like things are just starting to kind of happen. And he doesn't like that people like what she has to say. She's a very well-liked woman. She has many, many friends. And he basically sounds like he's just jealous because they're actually listening to her ideas and they don't really care for his anymore. So he ends up boarding her up in a room in the house and eventually has her come and taken away to this mental institution in Illinois State where this is heavy, I'm going to put it down, where she is meant to live. She thinks, okay, I guess I have no choice in the matter. I'm going to go there. We'll talk to the doctor. He'll see that I'm not crazy and he'll release me and I'll go home with my husband and we'll work things out. Like, she's not happy about it, but she feels like this is so unreasonable that how could this possibly happen to her? She has friends that are very against this, that are trying to stand up for her. And it turns out that she doesn't really get to go on trial or do anything to stand up for herself. Her husband owns her and he says she's crazy. End of story. So she gets there and she thinks everything's gone well. She meets the doctor. She gets along with the doctor. She has this very intelligent conversation with him. They seem to be on the same page. And then her husband leaves and she's like, what? Okay, well, I'm just going to prove that I am fine and, he'll have to come back and get me. Time goes on and the doctor very well agrees to her face that she is just fine. He lets her go anywhere in this building. She runs prayer groups on the floor that she's at with the other women. She sees that there's many other women there that do not belong there. While there are some mentally ill patients there, there are people that are just fine. And she pretty much has run of the building. She's working there for free, sewing up clothes, saving them all kinds of money. And for a while, she's like, you know what? At least here I can speak my mind and no one is going to shut me down. But I really miss my kids. I need to get home. She has at the time, such a age range with her kids. Some of them are grown. Some of them are 12. I think she has one that's 2 at the time. And she really just wants to be home with her children. So while she finally has the freedom to live her truth and speak her mind, and she's made friends within this institution, she wants out. The doctor says, you know what, you're not actually mentally ill. I can release you, but I need to release you to your husband who owns you. And she's like, no, I need to leave as a free woman. There is an independent woman. Otherwise he's just going to put me back into another institution. And this just goes on for years. And you get to see the horrors of how the mentally ill were treated and still are, but during this time period. And the author goes on to say, even though it wasn't happening within this specific institution, things that were happening in England and other places. So this author's done an amazing amount of research on this topic, and eventually she gets further punished and gets on the bad side of this doctor because she decides to stand up for herself, and then he makes her life a living hell, even worse than her husband. So she's now got 2 men against her and she has absolutely no power. But in every situation she's put in, this woman somehow finds the way to take this bullshit and turn it around. And I don't know how they did not break her spirit, because this went on for years and years. She was treated in such a way, along with other patients, not just her, that she says full out, because she's like writing all her thoughts down while she's there, at least until they realize that she's doing that, and then they take away all paper and pencils and everything. They don't let her have any rights. But she realizes that the way that these people are treated is that if you were not mentally ill going in, you would become mentally ill while you're there, because they are treated just less than human. And she takes it upon herself to help bathe other patients, help take care of them, to give them hope. And she is pretty much liked everywhere she goes by people that work at the facilities and the other people that are institutionalized. I don't want to go too far because I don't want to spoil anything, but this story, just when you think that things couldn't get any worse for her, they somehow do. And in every instance she rises up to fight for herself and for those other women. She never gives up. It's insane. Like, I was tired on her behalf just reading about these things, but she never gave up. She helped make a difference in the end. The only thought I wrote down, like I tabbed a lot of things, but the one thought I wrote down is that this is what women can accomplish when their focus isn't completely dominated by housekeeping and childbearing. Had Elizabeth not been kept from her children, she would not have had the time or energy to make these important changes happen. And basically, you back her into a corner, and she came back fighting with everything she had. And it was just a really inspirational story. I don't usually like to rate these type of books because it's a nonfiction book. It's a book about someone's story. I will say, as far as reading the book, because it is kind of large, the first half was definitely paced a lot better than the second half. I felt like the second half could have been a little bit more concise and to the point. But, you know, if Kate Moore wanted to give her all the pages that she needed to tell this story, that's just fine. I'd probably rate it a 4-star just because it did take me a while to get through it, but it was definitely an inspiring read, and I'm glad I read it. And I can't believe I read a nonfiction, but I would like to read more books like this. The next book I read, this one was for Folklore and Fairy Tale, and I'm glad I finally got to it because this has been on a couple TBRs. This is Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott. This is a Baba Yaga retelling. And I said in my TBR video that I don't really know the lore behind Baba Yaga, other than she was apparently a witch and she had a house with chicken feet. So this story takes place in the US between a pair of siblings, a boy and a girl. What are their names? Bellatine and Isaac. And they have been estranged for quite some time. When Isaac is the older one, and when he came of age, he decided to take off and live life on his own. He left his sister and his parents and just kind of took off and was living a drifter lifestyle, just going from place to place. And he's pretty much a con artist in ways, like a street performer type con artist. And he does what he's got to do. He meets some people and then he moves on to the next place and doesn't look back. The sister Bellatine, she lives a more quiet and private lifestyle. She is a woodworker, and they get this letter one day that their estranged grandma or great grandma, I can't remember, has left them something in their will, and they both need to show up to this place together to claim it. And they show up to get, this is their first time seeing each other in many years, and when they open this huge box, it is this house. And right away, Bellatine's like, I want to live there. I need a place to stay. She's kind of struggling to make it. And her brother says, okay, we can do that, but since you don't have the money to pay me my half of the house, how about this? For the next year, I will live with you. We'll travel around in our house with chicken feet, and we'll put on a puppet show, and all the money that we make will go to me to pay off this house. And this puppet show didn't just come out of nowhere. This was something that they did with their parents when they were younger. Bellatine has like an aversion to these puppets for some reason we don't really know. And she says, okay, but you have to do the puppetry and I will do all the rest of the show. So like their roles are swapped from when they were kids. So they start traveling around and they find out that there is some man that is after them, trying to find out where they are because he's after this house. And we kind of go from there. I will say that this does not really let me know exactly what the Baba Yaga story is, but there are chapters within here where we get kind of flashbacks from the point of view of the house. The house is telling the story to us, and I really like those chapters. And it kind of tells different stories about Baba Yaga. It's kind of interesting because the house fully acknowledges that, like most folklores, these are stories told from generations to generation, from place to place. And as these stories are retold, they often change. And so the house kind of acknowledges, well, did this really happen, or was this just the story that was told? And it was kind of fun because it was a dissection into folklores in general, and also let me kind of know about the Baba Yaga stories. But do we know what really happened? No, only the house knows, only Baba Yaga knows, but we know that the stories are changing as time goes on. So I thought this was the perfect pick for Folklore February for that reason. And this book took me quite a long time to get through, I will say. It's a bit over 400 pages, but it just took me so long because there's some heavy material in here. So I always just thought this was a Russian folklore, but it is a Jewish folklore as well. And the stories have a lot to do with the persecution of Jewish people, and the topics are quite heavy. And I really liked the way that the author weaved that into the story, and how certain trauma and inhumane acts are powerful enough to actually cause certain magic to happen in this book. So the sister in this book has some kind of magical abilities, and throughout the book it doesn't really talk to us about that. You just know that she has this ability, and she tries to deny that she has it. She tries to ignore it. It actually felt very Frozen. I think at one part she says conceal, don't feel, because the power is in her hands. And you're just like, why don't you tell us more about that? Why do we keep talking about this damn puppet show when we could be talking about these interesting things? One of the characters in this book turns out to be a statue that is brought to life. That's all I'm going to say. But it's like, we have this really interesting story. Why are we not talking about that more? And if you stick it through to the end, it makes sense because it's all kind of wrapped up at the end. But as you're reading it, it is a little bit frustrating to read because you want to hear more about these interesting parts, but we keep talking about puppets and you don't really know where it's going. I kind of felt like this was a 3 or 3.5 star most of the time I was reading it, but the ending really got me. So I think it bumped it up from a 3.5 to a 4 star. But I do think as a reader, you have to work at kind of getting there. This isn't just, to me, it wasn't an easier read. It took some like having to care about things and get past some things that I didn't absolutely love about the book to get there. But I do really like the way in the end that this author wove these real life stories and mixed it with the folklore and came up with like a whole new story, right? So for that reason, I would recommend it. I don't think it's going to be for everybody, but if you have the patience to stick through it, I do think it pays off in the end. And last but not least was the Fright Club book club pick for February, and that was The Haunting of Velkwood by Gwendolyn Keist. We read this along with Jen from Literary Love 123, and I will post our live show down below. I thought it was a really good discussion between the three of us about our feelings for this book, about our feelings for Gothic literature, for suburban Gothic, which was a subgenre that I didn't really realize existed until we read this, and then I thought about all the other types of media I've consumed that had that suburban Gothic. If you don't know, this is a story about a group of friends who all lived on the same street. They were all friends, and 3 of them went away to college, and something happens in their past, and all of a sudden the whole street where everyone lives, everybody has pretty much disappeared. You cannot go onto the street. The street will actually physically repel anyone who tries to enter the street, except for these 3 girls. And we are like 20 years later, and there is an investigator who finally talks one of the now women to going back into their past to see what's going on with the street. They want to run some tests, and she agrees reluctantly. She agrees to do this, and then it unravels the secrets behind everything that happened in the past. This is definitely a twist on your classic haunted house story because it's basically a haunted street, and it has a lot to do with trauma and secrets and things in the past coming to haunt us. And I had a really good time reading this. I ended up liking it more than I thought I would. I gave it 4 stars. I actually, after talking about it and really enjoyed our conversation so much, that I think I would reread this one in the future. Sometimes it's just great to talk about a book that you've read with other people and not just talk to the camera, because you get more out of it. And that's what Jen from Literary Love 123 helped me understand some parts of this book, but then also appreciate some as well. So I do recommend giving this a read. It's pretty short, and if you like Gothic fiction, I think that you will like this one. Whew. All right, so that's everything I read in the month of February. If I have to pick a favorite, I would have to say that some of my favorites came from the first half. I think I have to go with Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Clay McLeod Chapman. I also really enjoyed Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. And while this is a nonfiction book, I did really enjoy getting to learn about this part of history. And I don't even know who I am anymore. Like, reading books about the Dust Bowl, reading nonfiction history books about women's rights. I'm just leaning towards that a lot more lately. And I do want to pick up another book from this author. I would like to read more about real life people who have made a difference against all odds. But overall, February was a much better reading month for me than January was. And hopefully I continue on this upward arc in my reading journey for the rest of the year. You guys let me know down below if you've read any of the books I read this month, if you agree or disagree. I like to hear different opinions of the books that we're all reading, and if I inspired you to read anything or pick up anything or just check them out, I like to hear that too. I'll be back soon with another video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and stay spooky.